Hello, everyone, and welcome. It is 12 o'clock, so we are starting. I'm going to give everybody just a couple more minutes to join, maybe 12:02, and then we will get started. Could someone, please, who's on here live, just give me a 1 in the chat if you can hear me? You all, can anybody give me a 1 in the chat? Yeah, there we go. Okay, you can hear me, but chat is disabled. Okay. Thank you, Abby. We may have a problem when we get to Q&A if chat is disabled. All right. Okay, Abby, who's our wonderful marketing director and social media strategist, is telling me that we can do Q&A. We'll just have to send it through the Q&A. So that gets us started, and we will start with just a little bit of housekeeping while we wait for a couple other folks to join. So welcome. I'm Emily from Meeting House Farm, and it's great to have you all here. We're going to talk today about how to grow herbs in the Northeast, but also anywhere in the United States. Our experiences in the Northeast, so we'll share from that perspective, but a lot of what we'll talk about today could be used anywhere across the United States. We are so happy to have you here today, and just a couple logistical things. I'll be going through a presentation. I'll have slides up on the screen. Please feel free to take screenshots, take pictures with your iPhone, whatever works for you. That's great. And then also, please type questions in the Q&A bar on the bottom of the webinar so that I can answer your questions at the end of the presentation. So feel free to just put your questions in whenever you have them, and then I'm saving a little bit of time at the end to go back and answer all of your questions. All right, let's hope technology is on our side today, and I'm going to attempt to share some slides with you, and we'll get started. Let's see. Okay, please hold while we get through this technical issue that I did test out before I did this. So fun live, so good. Yeah, great, yay, okay. I think you all can see this. It's telling me that you can, so that's awesome. And we'll go ahead and assume that you can. If you can't, somebody please just start blowing up the Q&A, and I'll recognize that there's numbers coming in there. All right. So today we are going to talk about how to add medicinal herbs and culinary herbs and herbs for dyeing to your crop plan. Just adding herbs to your crop plan or to your garden can really increase the biodiversity of your garden, of your farm, and also the diversity of your revenue stream. We want to talk a few growing tips, what grows well in the Northeast specifically, because that's where my experience is from. And then the linchpin of people who dry herb or grow herbs is drying. It's all about the way you dry. So we've got the growing and we've got the drying, and really you can grow the most beautiful plants in the world and harvest them. And you have to be able to dry them well to be able to sell them. So drying is a big deal, and we'll spend some time there. Then we're also going to talk about how to sell these beautiful herbs that you've grown and dried and loved and cared for, and some options around that. And I'm also going to spend a little time at the end talking about our new herbal marketplace, which is a way for you to share your herbs with the nation, with the world, with local herb lovers. And I want to share this exciting new opportunity with all of you. Then we'll have a little space for Q&A. But like I said at the beginning, just feel free to stick your questions in the Q&A when you have them. And at the end, I'll come back and just run through the list answering questions. All right. So a little bit about Meeting House Farm and myself. I grew up in a family that loved plants, and we farmed, and my family has been farmers for generations. My parents were not farmers, but we absolutely grew a lot of our food, and we had animals, and we're more in the homesteading category. And I was lucky enough to have parents that looked at plants first and looked at food as medicine. And that really impacted me as I grew up. It was a wonderful way to grow up. And as many people do, once I was in my teenage years, I moved away from that, went to college, still ate pretty healthfully based on my upbringing, but it wasn't a focus. And I went into financial services after college, traveled a lot, worked internationally, got married, had twin boys. And it was after I had boys that I realized I really wanted to start growing food again. And I really wanted that food to be our medicine. And that led me right down the path of herbal studies, specifically with Deb Sewell and Jillian Twisla here in Maine. And I just dove right into growing my own apothecary garden. That really blossomed, bloomed, took off. And when I was 40, I left my job in financial services, jumped right off the cliff, and didn't have another job. And my husband and I had purchased a farm, the Meeting House Farm, which is the picture you see on the screen right now, a couple years prior. And knowing that we really wanted to have a farm, and we really wanted to focus on living with the land instead of living away from the land, and stewarding the land and taking care of it. So I left my job and started growing herbs. It was really quick when I realized I could not grow enough herbs. And I reached out to some of my friends in the biodynamic farming community, Brenna May at Patch Farm. She's an organic farmer. I'm a biodynamic farmer. Patch Farm is in Denmark, Maine. Reached out and I said, hey, Brenna May, how would you feel about growing some herbs? We've got a lot of demand and I can't fill it. And would you be interested? And she was game. I also reached out to Carol Power. She's the most amazing farmer. She's 80 plus years old now and still out there rocking it. I love the herbs that come from her farm. She also supported and jumped on, and both Brenna May with Patch Farm and Carol Power with Power Farm started growing herbs, and we started getting those herbs out into the marketplace and sharing them with local people. That was in 2020. And over the past 3 years, we've grown to 25 farms, and we're growing, and we've added different ways for folks to be a part of our Meeting House Farm community. I'll get into that a little bit more later, but I wanted to just give you some grounding as far as my background and how I'm coming into this and why this is such an important thing. I just feel really strongly that we need to grow local herbs. Medicinal herbs in particular, right now it's a 96 billion, that's billion with a B, dollar a year industry. And 90% of what is consumed in the United States from medicinal herbs comes from either China or Europe. So we are bringing in a lot of herbs into the United States today. And a lot of those could actually be grown locally. And herbs are really great revenue diversification mechanism for farmers. So I have a lot of passion around having and helping and encouraging existing farmers and new farmers to add herbs to their crop. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. Here's some more photos just for you of our farm here. And one of my favorite quotes, if you've been in any of my lectures before, you've probably heard this, but I learned about composting from a man named Bruno Folidor. He is a compost expert from South America. And I was lucky enough to be able to study with him through a biodynamic farming course I took at Avena Botanicals. And this quote has stuck with me. Soil is the ground of possibility for life to unfold. And that really sums up my whole philosophy around growing herbs. It's all about the soil. So why might you add herbs to your crop plan? Why would you invest in this? Why would you be curious about, if you're already farming today, if you are already gardening today, why would you add herbs? Well, you would add herbs because you want to build your soil. So back to that quote, herbs themselves build the soil without us doing anything, particularly milky oats and red clover. But most herbs, most things that are considered medicinal or even culinary herbs actually build the soil when you grow them. Very few herbs remove a lot of nutrients from the soil. So by adding herbs to your crop plan, you are inherently making your soil healthier. Herbs also add biodiversity. There's a polyculture. So if you plant herbs along the edges of your cornfield or the edges of your carrot field, you're immediately adding biodiversity, and you're adding biodiversity with a plant that you can also harvest. So you're adding biodiversity, and you're building your soil, and you can also harvest it. These are marketable cover crops and marketable ways that you can add the biodiversity, but you're able to sell them as well. Most herbs, not all, but most herbs are perennials. That means you plant them one time. It's not like carrots where you're planting 2 or 3 times a year. You're going to plant an herb one time, and then you're able to harvest year over year. And herbs are so generous. They keep giving back to us. Every year, they are more and more abundant. So from a pure labor perspective for farmers, adding herbs to your crop plan is such a brilliant idea. It also is going to diversify your income. So if you are a vegetable farmer or an animal farmer and you haven't considered herbs, adding herbs will diversify your revenue stream. Herbs may not be your whole revenue stream, but they're able to add a nice chunk to your revenue stream. There's a huge demand for them. They command a really good price. For example, nettles, $40+ a pound right now. Carrots are not $40 a pound. Nettles are perennial. You're going to grow a patch and then harvest and harvest and harvest, versus planting and planting and planting. So there's a lot of benefit, especially given the high rate of demand that's here in the United States. You can get income from the plants you think are weeds on your property. I wish that I had chat not disabled, but it is. So I would love to know, and we can get to this maybe in the Q&A, how many of you have nettles already on your property, wild raspberry leaves on your property, even something like knotweed or Rosa multiflora. Those are all invasive or weeds, or dandelions, another one. Most people consider them weeds. They're also really, really marketable herbs. So if you can harness those weeds that are already growing there, that's a great way to add to your revenue stream. The market is big. I already mentioned this. In 2019, it was 83 billion. It's already up to 96 billion. And let me just check my stats here. It's been growing at a rate of 18.9% and is forecast to continue through 2030. Like I mentioned earlier, the vast majority of the herbs that are used here in the United States are coming from China or Europe. And they're all coming from huge farms. What that means is that they're being farmed in a mechanical way. Tractors are cutting them. Huge drying, dehydration mechanisms are drying these herbs, and they're losing a lot of the medicinal value. Add to that the carbon footprint shipping them, and add to that, most herbs when they're brought into the United States are radiated to make sure there's no bugs or germs or what have you. So that is also reducing their efficacy. So these herbs would be much better suited grown locally here in the United States and shared locally, as local as you can get, right? So sometimes it's great if you can get the herb from California, but it would be even better if you could get that herb from next door. I truly believe that small farms are our future. I would love for us to move away from these huge farms, focus on smaller family farms where herbs are picked by hand, dried by hand, garbled by hand. Whoa, what's that word? I'll explain in a minute. And where we can really focus on tending the soil and tending the land and getting higher quality herbs sold at a great price. So these are all wonderful reasons why you should consider adding herbs to your crop plan. So I thought it might be helpful to talk through a few of the herbs that you could grow here in the Northeast and possibly all across the United States that both have a solid market value. So I picked these herbs as fairly easy to grow. These are not super finicky. They all have a good market value. There's all high demand on all of these. For the vast majority of what I'm sharing with you, we cannot keep them in stock for more than 1 year. So at our farm, we have 25 farms that are bringing their herbs into our farm, and we're sharing the herbs out. At the end of a year, we don't keep any herbs on the shelf for more than 18 months. So or 22 months at the most. So after 18 to 22 months, we have a huge sale, and then we're left with a few herbs. The amount of herbs we're left with fits in a really small box. We're talking almost nothing. So we are able to sell and meet demand and have people waiting for these herbs. Demand is not our problem, supply is. We need more farmers growing these herbs. So the herbs I've picked to share with you today as great herbs for you to start with, great herbs for you to grow, are all herbs that have high demand, they have solid market value, and they're pretty easy, or they're already growing at your farm. The picture you see ahead of you is actually our farm in the back, and that's a really beautiful mullein right up front. So mullein is one. A lot of folks see it as a weed, but it actually is a wonderful respiratory herb and has great market value, both the flower and the leaf. Other herbs that are possibly already on your property, on your land, nettle, huge value. We're already sold out for the year. We actually sell out of nettle before the season even starts. If I had acres and acres, I would have acres and acres in nettle. Dandelion root is another. Everybody has dandelion growing, but dandelion root sells really well. And if you cultivate it, so if you actually plant dandelion root in a lovely soil and a lovely row, it does two things. It builds the soil. So dandelion root actually pulls nutrients from down deep in the soil and brings it up to a level where other plants can reach it. And it also acts as a cover crop. And when you've cultivated it like that, it's so easy to pull, and the roots are gorgeous. So dandelion root is one. Yellow dock is another. Burdock, valerian, comfrey, red raspberry leaves. This one is huge. We cannot keep enough red raspberry leaves in stock. Super easy to grow, pretty easy to harvest, and relatively pest free. They do get some bugs at the end of the season, but red raspberry leaves are really great. Multiflora rose hips. This is an invasive, and I spend a lot of time harvesting these hips around this time of year. Multiflora rose hips are the multiflora invasive rose that has the little white flowers. I'm not suggesting that you plant this because it is invasive, it is non-native, but those rose hips are so sweet. They contain the highest amount of vitamin C of any of the rose hips. They're amazing for skin products, facial products, and they're amazing in tea. So multiflora rose hips, fabulous. The other benefit, if you have it growing and you start harvesting those rose hips, it actually helps that plant not to propagate any further. So the more you cut those rose hips, the fewer birds eat those rose hips and spread those seeds all over. I'm also noticing as I start to harvest that the more I clip those rose hips, the fewer rose hips appear on that bush. I don't know the scientific reason for this yet, but I'm studying it. I'm really curious about it. So if you have multiflora rose hips on your property, do me a favor, go out, just taste one. They're super sweet and delicious. Great for tea, great for jams. Just start harvesting if you already have them. Rosa rugosa is another. This one is non-technically invasive. It's on the watch list right now. Those petals are amazing and highly sought after. St. John's wort is another. Yarrow, and then mullein I already mentioned. So here's a long list of herbs that are likely already growing on land that you steward that can be harvested and sold. And there's high demand and people really want these herbs and we need to get them out into the world. There's other herbs that you can grow that also have great market value and act as cover crops. The two most prominent are red clover and milky oats. That's a picture of me harvesting our milky oats. They are our cover crop of choice. We are a no-till farm, and so milky oats are super easy. They winter kill, and when they're at the milky stage, we can harvest, sell the milky oats fresh and dried, and then cut the oat straw. You can sell oat straw, and it also acts to build your soil. So milky oats are the best cover crop out there. Red clover also has great market value, wonderful cover crop. You do have to either smother or till it in to get it to change crops. So if you're a no-till farm, red clover can be a little bit problematic. But that said, if you have a field of red clover, that is an herb we cannot keep in stock. I think we have 2 4-ounce bags left right now, and that's it for the season. So red clover is definitely something to consider. Super easy to grow again, and really a wonderful crop to add to your crop plan. Let's talk a little bit about some perennials now. These are all, again, great market value, fairly easy to grow. Skullcap is one. Echinacea, that's the picture you see there. I love echinacea because you can harvest the flower and the leaves the first year you plant it. You do have to wait 3 years to harvest the root, but you're able to do both leaf, flower, and root. So it's really giving you a lot of abundance. Catnip is another. California poppy, chamomile, elder. Elder is a bush, but you can harvest the flowers and the berries. Lemon balm, marshmallow. That's another one where you harvest the flower and the leaf for the first 2 years, and on the 3rd year, you can harvest the root. Mints of all types. As pervasive as mints are, we are always running out of mint. So growing mint is a great thing. Rhodiola, this one's a little tricky to grow, but once it gets established, it does really well in the Northeast and any other coldish kind of climate. Arnica is wonderful. It's currently running at $120 a pound, maybe even $126. Makes fabulous oils and serums and hugely high demand there. Great to grow. It spreads on its own. It does take a few years to really establish. Arnica is a great thing to make a patch of. Motherwort is another. Motherwort you might even have wild growing on your land. And harvesting it just as it flowers is a wonderful way to limit its spread and also to be able to add to your revenue stream. All right, now we have some annuals that I'd like to suggest. Tulsi, calendula, and spilanthes. These plants are all plants you'd have to plant every single year. So up until now, we've been talking about plants that either are acting as a cover crop or are already on your land, or you can plant them once and continually harvest. These plants do have to be started every year, and I do start all of these in our greenhouse. So this is a little bit more like your standard farming. We follow our crop rotation procedures here. So I plant calendula on a 2-year crop rotation. Everything else is on a single year and transition it through. However, the market's great for all of these. They're super easy to grow. Definitely plants to consider. All right, let's move on to roots. Roots are a little bit bigger investment. So when you're planting roots, you need to think 3 to 4 years out, and they take a little time to plant. and you can't harvest them for 3 to 4 years. So this is the investment. This is the bigger investment. Codenopsis, echinacea, which I already mentioned, but echinacea, you can harvest the leaf and the flower the first 2 years. Elecampane, marshmallow, same as echinacea, you can harvest the leaf and the flower. Siberian ginseng, this one takes 4 years. Black cohosh and Solomon seal. All of these plants, great market value. They're all fairly easy to grow. They grow really well in the Northeast, and many of them will grow really well across the country. They take 3-ish years before you can harvest, but once they establish themselves, they do really, really well. And they have great market value. So these are great plants to consider adding to your garden, to your crop plan, to your farm. All right, then we have trees. So these are the biggest investment, right? Trees take the longest. Ginkgo is a wonderful plant tree to grow. Hawthorn is also native here, and there's so many hawthorns that you may have these just growing on your land anyway. Schisandra, this is a herb used extensively in traditional Chinese medicine. It's a beautiful vine. You can use it ornamentally as well. The berries are very much so sought after, and we can't get our hands on them very often. So that would be a wonderful one to grow. It does take a little time to establish. Elder is another. Elder is also native to Maine, grows really easily here, and it actually doesn't take that long to establish. So definitely one to consider. Those are our herbs that I'd love to just have you think about potentially growing. So if you are interested in growing herbs and you're thinking about it, consider those herbs. And I hope you all took quick screenshots as we went through that. Once you've picked out what you might want to grow, and if you are thinking about growing herbs to sell, growing herbs to add to your revenue stream, pick 3. Don't pick 80, which is easy to do. Pick 3 and really focus on those herbs, build a relationship with them, understand how they grow, understand where they want to be on your land, and then add to that amount. But really, what I've learned over the years is the fewer you grow, the more you can focus, the better you'll be at growing those particular plants. Also focus on soil health. So here are some tips on how to focus on your soil's health so that your herbs will thrive. Compost, and we add herbs to our compost to help it be just super rich in micronutrients. We put probiotics on our soil using BD 500, which is a biodynamic prep spray. We are a no-till farm, and I highly recommend considering that, and I'll show you a little bit more about that in a minute. And we feed our mycorrhizae. We treat our mycorrhizae fungi like they are the queens and kings of the soil, and they are. We do almost everything to just feed them and keep them healthy, and they are abundant on our farm. Pictures you see are our soil, the cow horns we use to make the BD 500 prep spray, and that's my son years ago storing BD 500 with our chicken Amelia, who has since passed, but she was a good buddy around here. So practicing limited soil disturbance, very important to soil health. I'm just going to play this video. Hopefully it works. Let's see. Yes, it's working. Okay, great. So this is making a new row at Meeting House Farm. And I don't know if you noticed at the beginning, but we mow, but we don't till. So we've never tilled the area, and you can see all the different rows behind the new row that we're making there. We lay down cardboard, and then we come in with compost and spread the compost over the cardboard. All of our rows are 4 feet wide, and we usually run about 25 feet long in sections so that it's easy to maintain. After we put the compost down, if it's going to be a perennial bed, we put wood chips and deciduous wood chips. This is important. If it is going to be an annual bed, we use straw. Why? So perennial beds with wood chips feed mycorrhizal fungi. And so the more wood chips you have, the better off you are. However, if you mix those wood chips down into the soil, into the compost, the wood chips, as they disintegrate, as they decompose, actually steal nitrogen from the soil. So you don't want a situation where you're constantly digging into the soil with wood chips on top because you're going to keep mixing those wood chips into the soil. So for our annual beds where we're practicing crop rotation, we're constantly in there. Those beds, I just put straw on the top and we use wood chips for the paths. All the perennial beds where we're not constantly in there digging, then we put wood chips down. Here's a couple shots of, that's arnica, the yellow flower there, and the wood chips around it. So arnica, we never dig arnica up, we're just pulling the flowers. So all of our arnica beds have wood chips, and interestingly enough, arnica spreads via rhizome. So the arnica has just completely taken over the bed and you can't even really see the wood chips anymore. We're not able to go back in there and put more wood chips. The arnica is so thick. That's a good problem to have. So wood chips, it's really important to use deciduous wood chips to feed mycorrhizal fungi. Coniferous wood chips, so wood chips from pines and firs, actually retard growth. They feed a completely different type of fungi, and they will not be helping your herbs to grow. So make sure you're getting deciduous wood chips. The very best wood chips come from the ramial parts of a tree. So those are the branches and the leaves, like the smallest branches. But any deciduous wood chips will really work fine. And if you've been around me at all before, you'll know the way I get wood chips. I wait until someone in my neighborhood is, or down the road, is chipping a tree. And then I go up and I just ask the guys who are chipping if they would come and drop it in my yard, and I give them $20 for beer money. I have been known to run after a wood chipping truck to catch them, to give them the $20 and get them to come back to our place and drop the wood chips, but it works every time. Offer a little beer money, a little lunch money, and you'll get your wood chips. We also enhance our soil vitality with herbs. We are an herb farm. That's really all we grow here at Meeting House Farm. So we use herbs as our fertilizer and as our pesticide. We use a kelp and fish emulsion weekly until solstice. We use plant ferments and teas to boost the health of the plants through the season. Nettle and comfrey are my favorite. How do I do this? So after we're done harvesting nettle for the spring, right before it goes to seed, we do one more harvest, put it in a 5-gallon bucket, let the rainwater fill it up, and then leave it until it really stinks. At our house, that's usually when my kids are saying, "Mom, what is that?" They're embarrassed. And that's the time to strain out the plant material. It's bubbly, it's fermented, but that fermentation process has actually pulled the nutrients out of the plant leaf and into the solution. I dilute it about a 1 to 10, 1 to 5, and then put it in a spray, like a backpack sprayer, and spray it on the roots of the plants. You obviously don't want to do this right before you harvest, but it really boosts the nutrients of the plants. Very similar process with comfrey, very similar results. So both of them are full of micronutrients. Nettle has silica, which helps the plants to really produce once you get to about solstice. That is kind of our secret at Meeting House Farm to boost our plants throughout the season. We don't use any other pesticides or chemicals. We do use yarrow tea and also absinthe tea, depending on if we have absinthe tea for aphids, yarrow tea for powdery mildew. So we are using plants to support other plants at our farm, and it really brings a different level of vitality to our farm and to our soil. Cover crops, I've mentioned this before. This is milky oats at our farm, and cover crops are great for keeping the soil in place, for building its, its vitality. It maintains moisture, and if you're using oats, they winter kill, so you can plant right into them the next year. So definitely cover crops are the way to go if you can, once you've harvested, throw some oats down, super easy. And if you sow them early in the spring, you can harvest by July and sell those oats, and then you can get another crop in as well. Overwinter your roots. So this is really applicable to right now. At our farm, as we're winterizing beds, when we are getting a bed ready for the winter, we cut the plant down to about the soil level, but we leave the roots. Why? our friends, the mycorrhizal fungi, who we treat so well around here, we leave the roots in the soil for them because they will hibernate in those roots all winter long. And then in the spring, the roots either disintegrate or we can pull them out once they have other roots to go to. So we are always looking after our mycorrhizal fungi at Meeting House, and we leave roots in the ground all winter long. So you can take that step out of your winterizing plan of pulling the plants out. Don't pull them. If you need to get rid of the plants, just chop them. You can chop and drop. You can chop and compost, but leave those roots in the soil. Oh, I'm going backwards. Hold on a second. You've already seen all of this. I don't know why it's doing that. There we go. All right, back where we should be. So once you've grown these beautiful plants, it's really important if you are going to grow for production, if you are growing because you want to sell your herbs, you need to know how to dry your herbs. I can't tell you how many people grow beautiful echinacea and then it molds when they put it in a bag. Why? Because it didn't get dried well. So if you're going to grow herbs to sell, invest in a way to dry them right away. It's really important. If you have questions about this, I do consultations. We'll talk about this at the end, but there's ways for you to be involved with Meeting House Farm and we can help you. But drying is the secret sauce. So I've given you growing tips. I've told you what you can grow. Great. But if you can't dry it, you can't sell it. So this is the most important part of all the things we're talking about today. What do you need to dry successfully? First, you need a home processor's kitchen license. These are $35 a year. They're very easy to obtain. But if you're growing in Maine, you need this. If you're growing in a lot of the other states, you also need this. So this is not unusual. It's not a big deal, but you do need it if you're going to process your herbs, which is the act of picking and drying them. So you need this. It is, you can go online and Google it, and it's really quick and easy, and get on their website and sign up, and they'll come and inspect your house. You need either a double sink or a dishwasher. You need some method for sanitization, and you need a dry room that is secure and rodent proof. So that's what the home processor is going to look for. You also need a dry room. You need a place to dry your herbs that is rodent proof. There's no pets. We don't want herbs with cat hair in them. There's a fan and a dehumidifier and racks. You're also going to need sanitization equipment, garbling screen. There's that word again. We'll talk about it. And you need a clean room and a place to garble. So you need a place that isn't contaminated with other stuff to do your garbling. And then you need a way for storing. Let's talk a little bit more about the drying room. You can see pictures here. This is our drying room. We have a combination of wooden racks. You can see those kind of up there in the corner. And then we have collapsible fabric racks. So we are modular, so we can put stuff up and take it down. This is about a 10 by 12 room. We're able to do over 1,000 pounds of wet every week if we want to. And we usually do in the summer, like right in the peak of the season. It's completely dark. There's great airflow. We have a fan and a dehumidifier in here. We keep it between 80 and 110 degrees during the prime of the season with 30% humidity. It's completely rodent proof. We wire wrapped it with hardware cloth so that they literally cannot get in unless they run through my feet when I open the door. So there are no rodents in there. The last thing you want is for mice to come in and eat your calendula crop, and you have to throw it all out because you can't sell something mice have been in. You can also put pheromone traps in because, let's face it, bugs lay eggs on plants. herbs or plants, you pick the plants, there's going to be eggs and bugs on the plants you bring in. Even if you're careful and you look under leaves, which we do, before you go from the garden and the field into the dry room, the chances are almost 100% that there are going to be hitchhikers. There's going to be bugs coming in. Pheromone traps can encourage them to leave the plant and go to the trap. And you also have multiple points of quality assurance. So you're looking as you're bringing the plants in, you look as you take them off the dry racks, you look as you garble, and you look as you bag, and watch for pest pressure. So that's definitely something that we're constantly looking for. The last thing anybody wants is to open their bag of calendula and have a moth fly out, right? You don't want that. So we are very careful and really watch for bugs. The truth is, though, bugs are a part of it, and you just have to keep your eyes open and be right on top of it. Wooden or cloth racks, which I mentioned earlier, and a very important point is to avoid cross-contamination. So you can see the wooden racks. You have to have a solid divide between plant types if you're stacking plants one on top of the other. Why? You cannot sell Tulsi that has yellow calendula in it unless you're selling a blend, right? So if you're selling Tulsi and it has calendula in it, you have to sell it as a blend, not as Tulsi, because nobody wants that contamination. So we have to be really careful. There's also folks with allergies, particularly with chamomile. Chamomile is a real allergen. There's other Asteraceae family members that are also allergens for folks. So when you're growing to be medicinal grade or even culinary grade, you need to keep cross-contamination at a minimum. You do this by cleaning your racks in between plants and not stacking plants on top of each other unless you have a solid barrier. So in our wooden rack system, we actually have solid boards that can slide in and out. They're really thin, that they keep cross-contamination down or to nothing. And then for the cloth racks, we don't put anything in there but one variety of herb at a time. So be really careful with cross-contamination. How long do you dry? You want them to be easily crumbled. It takes about 5 days in our dry room at most when we're in peak season. And if you're keeping it somewhere between 80 and 110 degrees and 30% humidity, 5 days is a pretty good number. Keep in mind, you don't really want to go above 110 degrees. This is why I don't like dehydrators. If you're using a dehydrator, you're kind of cooking your plants. We don't want cooked herbs. We just want gently dried herbs that preserves the most medicinal benefit. So if you're drying, dry them. 5 days is perfect. Longer than 5 days, you need to be watching to make sure they're not going bad. Roots can take longer than 5 days and they're fine, but just be really mindful if it goes longer than 5 days. And anything that is overnight and instant, you're probably too hot and you're probably cooking them. So slow dry, dark room will give you the best medicinal constituents. It will give you the best quality. So once you've dried your herbs, you want to put your herbs in a sanitized bucket. So it's considered food after you've dried it. So as soon as we've dried anything at all, everything goes into a sanitized bucket. And that's following our home processor license guidelines. And then once we've brought it out of the dry room, we garble it. So what does garbling mean? Well, here's a picture. I've used this word a couple times today, and it's the herb industry word for breaking the plant material down from a full leaf size to a smaller size. So you can see there in that little wooden bowl, those leaves, I think that's Anaciss, went from the full leaf down to something that looks like you might get it in a tea bag, right? So this is important. Most people in the industry want it garbled. There's a few people who want whole leaf. Whole leaf is really beautiful, but if you're drying to sell, you need to have a plan to garble. We sell garbling racks, a whole system at Meeting House Farm. You can make one. It's a metal screen. Make sure it doesn't have lead. make sure it's stainless steel, over a bucket, and then you're able to gargle. There's lots of different ways. Most people make them themselves or buy a setup like this. It's a wonderful meditative task, and it does take a little bit of time, but it's another way that when processing by hand, you can really ensure the quality of your herbs. After you've garbled, you need to store your herbs. Here's some do's and don'ts. We use compostable barrier bags here at the farm, and I think a lot of our farms that are part of our collaborative do that as well. Stay away from anything that's BPA. I don't like to store anything in plastic anyway. I believe the plastic kind of leaches its smell into the herbs and you lose some of its natural vitality. We typically store in glass or in the paper bags. Glass is great if you have small volume. Once you start having higher volume though, you really have to go to the paper barrier bags. Otherwise, you just can't store enough in glass. It would be untenable. Herbs need to be stored in a cool and dark place. All of our herbs are kept in a climate controlled area, so it doesn't get too hot, doesn't get too cold. Please don't put your herbs in old grocery bags. Don't put them in plastic bags. Don't put them in when they're slightly damp. They will mold. I can guarantee it. It happens. And please don't leave your herbs out in the air and sunlight. They will also fade. Excuse me. So we've talked today about what to grow, how to grow it, some really important pieces for success, and how to dry it, which is the most important. And then now we get to how do you share your herbs? So you've done all this and you put all this love into these plants and you want to share them. Meeting House Farm is a great way for you to share them. We are a collaborative. We have a shared e-commerce site. We share social media. We do a lot of cross promotion with marketing and sales and email newsletters. We are all about bulk dried herbs only. We don't do any tea blends, no tinctures, no value add products right now. That will eventually change, and I'll talk about that more in just a little bit. And you can also do farmers markets, you can sell online, and you can blend your own teas. So in our experience, there's a lot of different ways to get your herbs out into the world. We think Meeting House Farm is a great one. There's also, like I said, farmers markets and tea blending and having some value add products. Meeting House Farm. Let's talk a little bit about this and then we'll go right to questions and answers. I know I'm getting a little tight on time. Meeting House Farm, so we're 25 farms and growing. We have 3 ways for you to be a part of our community. The first is our brand new herbal marketplace, which we are so excited about. It allows farms across the country. You don't have to be in Maine. You can be anywhere. It allows farms to sell their herbs, what they've grown themselves. So you sell that, you package it, you set yourself, you put your own brand on it, you ship it yourself, and you price it yourself. But we give you an e-commerce platform to use. We cross promote you. We share you on social media. And we take care of all the sales tax, we take care of all the e-commerce costs, and we take care of all the shipping. So it really reduces barriers for farms, and that's really what we're here to do. So we want herbs out there. We are here to help you do it. The herbal marketplace is an awesome way to do it and also build your brand. We also do community growing. This has to be locally. You would need to be able to deliver your herbs to us here at Meeting House Farm. You grow it, we sell it. It's a standard retail agreement. Basically, we pay you 50% of the price of our retail pound. So if it's nettles and they're $40 a pound, we'll pay you 20 and off you go. You just grow it and garble it to our spec and drop it off. Super easy. Nurture farms is another way. We have a very limited amount of nurture farms that we accept every year. We will open that on February 2nd this year. This is supported by a USDA grant, and you get our time in consult. We help you get a dry room started. We help you know what to grow. This is for farms who want to grow 250 pounds or more. So volume wise, you don't have to start at that much, but this is for farmers who really want to be herb farmers or have that be a very significant part of their crop plan. Those folks can apply and we will help you get started. We will hold your hand every step of the way. Back to Herbal Marketplace for a minute. That is for folks who can sell at least $100 a month, basically. That would make it worth your while. So Herbal Marketplace, you need to have at least $100 in herbs to sell every month. Community growing, there's really no volume. You need to drop off at least a pound or more of your herbs. So other than that, it's a great way to get started. So 3 ways to interact with Meeting House Farm, 3 ways we can help you share your herbs in the world. I also have a book on here, The Organic Medicinal Herb Farmer by Jeff and Melanie Carpenter. If you want to read more, that's a great way to do it. Meetinghouse.farm has tons of resources out there. You're welcome to reach out to us. Farmers at meetinghouse.farm, if you have questions, we're here to help you. And you can also follow us on Instagram if you're not already. Right, thanks for being here. I'm gonna jump to Q&A. And if anybody has questions, I can see them. I'm gonna stop my share and go to Q&A here. Anybody have questions? We have 8 minutes left and I'm happy to take them, but you'll need to type them into the Q&A section. All right, I am not seeing any questions, so I'm going to call it. Thank you all so much for being here live. I love that. And thank you all for who are listening after the fact. Love you all too. And hope you have a great rest of your day. Reach out with any questions. Oh, we've got questions coming in now. Hold on. We won't shut it down quite yet. Let's see. Allison Hill is asking, what do we use for aphids? So for aphids, we use absinthe. We grow the plant and then make a tea, just like you would, fresh. You cut the plant fresh, put it in a pot on the stove, cover that with water, and then boil it to make a tea, and then cool that down. And you can add a little neem oil if you want, or you can just use the absinthe and spray that on your plants 1 or 2 times a week, and it really cuts down the aphids. You do need to be careful not to spray around bees because it would also hurt the bees. So I usually spray after 4 p.m. in the afternoon. Absinthe is a great plant to use for that. Let's see, other questions. Similar to the absinthe for aphids, what do you use the yarrow tea for? We use yarrow tea for powdery mildew. Again, really nice to add neem oil to that, but you can just use yarrow, same process, cut the plant flower, leaf, boil it on the stove, make up a tea, and then strain the plant material out. You can put it in a sprayer and spray that on your plants. It will reduce over time the amount of powdery mildew, and you can spray it directly on the soil and also on the leaf. Any other questions? I'll wait just a minute. I think that was a little quick last time. All right. Thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your day. Take care.